Hello friends. Some of my friends coming from the science background often question me very humorously, why study literature? Well, I know there are myriad ways in which I can answer them, but I also give them a very interesting reply. Reading maketh a full man, conference a ready man, and writing an exact man. Well, this is a quotation by Francis Bacon. Believe me friends, a little bit of reading every day, a little bit of writing every day builds up your morale, your confidence, and it literally makes you very pleasing kind of a personality. Well, whatever. Today there is something very interesting that I wish to share with you. When I observe my optional English students coming to the fourth semester, I find them very much hyper, I find them very much irritated with the syllabus and the kind of novels or poetry, whatever I teach. Maybe because all the previous 3 semesters they have enjoyed the blissful state of the Elizabethan age, the purity and the simplicity of the age of Milton, and the coming back of the classical age in a neoclassical way in the age of Dryden or in the Augustan age. And they have been with strange kinds of stories, they have been with romances, they have been with kind of a bravery tales, and they have known friendship, they have known society in all the previous semesters. But when it comes and stops to the 4th semester, when I introduce them the 20th century literature, they are not quite comfortable with this. I know the complexity of the 20th century literature, because if you can take up fiction, you have various genres. You have the horror fiction, you have the science fiction, you have a realistic fiction, and you have the psychological fiction. And when you come to poetry, you have the imagery, immense imagery introduced, like the cat imagery, of the dog imagery, the door imagery, the window imagery. And there is so much of imbalance between reality and what's going on in the kind of imagery that is being used in the poetry. Why did poetry become so conscious? Like you take up T.S. Eliot's Prufrock, you take up W.B. Yeats, going back to Byzantium. What is being literally indicated in all the poetry is still a kind, the students are still in a kind of a confused state. When you take drama, suddenly there is no connection between the drama of the 20th century and the previous centuries. All this builds up a kind of a tension so much in them that they fail to perform properly in their exams, whether it is internals or the semester exams. So today I thought, let me focus this lecture particularly for those students who have fear of answering 20th century questions. Why did this all suddenly happen during the 20th century? You must know, whatever the features of 20th century literature, let them keep them aside and let them deal with them in the next video. But then the second half of the 19th century and the entire 20th century was kind of a upheaval in the history of man's normal life. This all began, I guess, my dear students, with the publication of Darwin's Origin of Thesis in 1859. It was such a blow to the people's belief in religion, people's belief in the origin of man. Because till date they used to feel, they used to believe, they had a faith that God created man. And they always found animals very inferior to them. They consider themselves to be children of God, consider themselves to be angels. But with the publication of Origin of Species in 1859, man came to realize that he is nothing but the next form of a monkey. So God is of course the supreme creator of the nature, but he did not actually create the human somewhere in the heaven, or all the faith that they had regarding Adam or Eve or the original sin of the man and the continuation of life till then was all devastated. To such an extent that some of them, majority of them, lost faith in their religion, lost faith in going to temples, churches or mosques. So this happened throughout the world. This was a kind of a sensation throughout the world, not just in England or in some parts of Europe, but this is how this particular book influenced the other areas, other fields of knowledge also. And then at the same time, there was a revival of some psychological books. Those were written in the past. For example, Freud and Jung had come in 1816, 1820s with their publications on the interpretation of dreams, or the general introduction to the psychoanalysis, the neuropsychology, psychopathology, all these things which were literally the kind of confusion before the publication of Origin of Species were revived. People rushed to read what exactly is written in the field of psychology. And apart from that, you had William James, who wrote the Principles of Psychology in 1890. So a stream of psychological writing came up in the second half of the 19th century. And then there were people witnessed the World War and the devastation caused by the World War, and along with that there was the Industrial Revolution, and then there was mass migration, and the family system, the social setup was all immensely disturbed. So this led to a kind of a strange development in all the areas of knowledge, and naturally students, how can you ignore literature? Literature was immensely influenced by science. This is one particular period where you have the domination of science over literature. So what happens exactly in 20th century with the coming of psychological writers like James Joyce, Virginia Woolf, or D.H. Lawrence, or William James, Henry James? What happens is literature is not left so pure an entity, or it's not in that raw form which was found in the previous ages. Many of the social sciences, many of the natural sciences immediately influenced literature. So literature was either influenced by sociology, or either influenced by psychology, or either influenced by the Industrial Revolution, the economical status of a country or a society, or literature was influenced by some innovation, some invention in some scientific field. So the clubbing of the social sciences, the natural sciences into the area of literature was quite a complex kind of a thing, and that led to various genres which are beyond the grasp of students at the initial stage. Like you have the science fiction, you have the social fiction, you have the psychological fiction, you have D.H. Lawrence's Oedipus Rex, Oedipus Complex, and then you have the Virginia Woolf's stream of consciousness fiction, and James Joyce, Wandering in the Mind, so much and so forth. So what I mean to say is, this literature of 20th century looks complex because of this psychological approach to the literature, whether it is fiction, whether it is poetry, drama, prose. A lot of psychoanalytical adventure is being done in the field of literature. As you know, friends, for your fourth semester, you have modern literature, and you have a special emphasis on the novel, the fiction of the 20th century, which was, of course, dominated all other genres during the age, all other trends, all other forms in literature. So when you particularly land up with the stream of consciousness literature, you just cannot delve immediately into the books which are based on this theory, because this needs to have a kind of a psychological study. You need to have a bit of knowledge of certain psychological theories before entering into the stream of consciousness novel, or before entering into the psychological novel. So what could be that? What did James Joyce do, or what did Virginia Woolf do, or what did William James do, or what did Henry James do? They all were very much interested in the psychoanalytical theory of Freud and Jung. So they kept those theories, those scientific inventions for their base, and then they wrote the kind of literature which is, of course, very much apt for that age, for the happenings of those age. So before knowing what stream of conscious novel is, or from where to start writing about stream of consciousness novel, we need to have a little bit of information about the human psyche. So I don't want to say that in the previous novels and the previous poetry there was no information about the psychology, or people had not given any importance to human psyche. It was there, but it was a very it was just a part and parcel of that particular book. But then with the 20th century, that's the major thing in a work of art, whatever it is. So, well, let's come back. If we need to have a little bit of knowledge of psychoanalysis of Freud and Jung, we should know, or we should have a little bit of information about the mind or the psyche. So there are two things about the mind. One is the conscious mind, and the other is the unconscious mind. So we often live a life with our conscious mind. That is, we are aware of what we are talking, what we are doing, what we are eating, or we are aware of our behavioral patterns. We are aware of all our surroundings. We know in what kind of civilization today. We know what principles the society expects from us. We know what are our etiquettes. So this is all happening in the conscious mind. But then most of us do not know what exactly happens in the unconscious mind. The unconscious mind has all those feelings, all those emotions which happen in the intricacies of the mind. Like you have your hidden desires, you have your hidden hopes, you have your dreams, your aspirations, your ambitions. You have that feeling of fear, you have that feeling of loss, you have that feeling of sexuality, you have the feeling of escapism. All these things, they are embedded in the unconscious mind, and of course we have stored all these things there, but we are still very much unaware of all these feelings when the conscious mind is acting. So what happens? In our dreams, we go to our unconscious mind, a subconscious mind, and we realize those things which were literally kept in our airtight compartment. So, according to the psychoanalytics, or according to the speakers of psychology, thought cannot be restricted. Like thought is a kind of a stream. It flows from the unconscious level to the conscious level. But then because of man being a social animal, or because of the kind of society we have, and we need to go abide by the principles of the society, lots of bridges, lots of dams are built between the conscious and the unconscious mind, and those thoughts remain there, sometimes forever, for a lack of vent. So what happens exactly in a stream of conscious novel is the character in a particular novel, or the character in a particular poem doesn't live in this external world, doesn't come out and struggle in this external world. The character is in its unconscious area, it's in unconscious world, wherein he is experiencing his desires which have been hidden, wherein he is enjoying his passions and doing all those things which are literally impossible for that particular character to do it as a person in the unconscious, conscious level. So the stream of consciousness novel, its theme, its plot is all constructed in the center of the unconscious mind. Now, what makes the writer do this? We have to literally introduce our students to three more things. Before telling them the conscious and the unconscious things, we have to tell them three more things also. In the mind, we have three areas again. We have the id, we have the ego, and we have the superego. These are the three areas of the mind. So what I was telling you about the unconscious thing is all available in the id of the mind. And it's a hidden area which is not very much known to the conscious mind. So the id give birth to all your desires, your feelings, your emotions, and they get stored like a stream. You cannot stop feelings or passions rising in the id of your mind. It's like a stream, it keeps flowing, you can't build any bridges there. It has its own area, and the things keep up cropping there. Now you have the ego. The duty of the ego is kind of a mediator between the id and the superego. What does the ego do? The ego picks only the important things from the id. It uses its reason, it uses its logic, it uses its practicality, and from the utilitarian point of a man. So what it does, it picks only all those emotions and feelings which are literally sensible in the outer world. So now its duty is just to pick and then pass it to the superego. So once the selected things are passed from the ego to the superego is the master in shaping those expressions, shaping those feelings, shaping those emotions, ordering them, giving them a chronological order, giving them a particular structure, giving them beauty, painting them, and then modeling them. It's all done by the superego. So once the superego has literally given shape to one feeling that has come from the id, that comes out of the human mind into the exterior world. So this is how the mind has been functioning. But the writers of psychology question us, how long can you make the id or the unconscious mind sit quiet? How long? So we have different kind of people in this world. Everyone does that. We meet some people, we are very happy, and we say to others, what a cozy person he is, what a fantastic person he is, love to be with him. And then very next moment we meet some other person and we say, what a funny kind of a lady, very intolerable, keep her away. And then very next moment we say, what a horrible person on earth, just beyond my imagination, how fierce he is, throw him away from me. So we come to conclusions, we become choosers, and we have the nature of judging those people. So have we ever thought, why does a human behave so good, and why does a human behave so abnormal or fierce or in whatever way? So we see around us maniacs, we see around us serial killers, we see around us criminals, those who have been doing horrible things, and then we see around us escapists. There are some people who are very much introverts, there are some people very much extroverts. So the society is a mixture of all those people. Then why isn't one human like the other? So this is all the game, dear students. It's the game of the id, ego, and the super ego of the mind. So those people who have been able to balance and obey their super ego overcome what is there in their id. But those people who cannot agree with the super ego, they usually go back to their id. They want to excavate what is there in the id. There is a kind of a volcanic burst, and man behaves in so many different ways. At once you have dual personalities, you have different personalities. There is one face inside, there is one face outside. So you have different types of people around you. So this is a kind of a disease which increased with the coming up of 20th century. Because you must remember, we came away from our religious beliefs, we came away from all our moral ethics. Because once we lost faith that God created man, God did not create a man, there was a kind of a complex interrogation going into ourselves, and we kept on asking people also. So the mind was contaminated with the rise of this scientific inventions. I don't say that this all happened for a bad cause, but this literally happened for a good cause according to the stream of consciousness writers. They said, stop. Don't worry, there is no need of anxiety, because long back Aristotle in his concept of tragedy had told us that you have to introduce catharsis in a tragedy. That is, people should come and watch a particular tragedy and they should feel the character crying, they should feel the emotions coming out, they should weep, they should have that outburst in the theatre, and once they've released all the pressure from inside, they can go back home so very easily, so very happily. So the concept of catharsis was again brought into the stream of consciousness technique. So what Virginia Woolf, she was herself a sufferer in society. She had her own mental illness. It was James Joyce who was so much confused of the 20th century balances and imbalances. He was himself in a kind of a strange state of mind. So what did these writers do? They wanted to heal their people. They wanted to provide some remedy to the people. They did not want that every human being should visit a psychiatrist or every human being should be treated psychologically. They wanted to do this treatment in the form of literature. So what did they do? They took the readers into the minds of the characters. So the character itself was nothing but something inside the brains of a particular person. So the reader could directly enter into the mind of the character and unravel everything which was so beautiful, which was so much left behind by him in his past ages or in his past years. So he could unravel, he could feel, and once after reading, enjoying and feeling all that the character in the novel is feeling or in the poem is feeling, he would come back to his original state of mind, or he would come back to the existing society and console himself that there is some vent wherein the id or wherein the unconscious of the mind could play, could be a child in that particular world. So this was the greatest contribution of the stream of consciousness novel. But what is the difficulty for the students in learning it? Because when you have a normal fiction in your hands, it has a beginning, a middle and an end. But then when it comes to stream of consciousness fiction or anything, a prose work or a short story, you must have studied Araby by James Joyce. So what happens is there is no beginning, middle and end. So a character immediately rushes back to the past and immediately from there jumps to the future and then comes to the present. So there is no chronological order and there is no structuring of his thoughts, his ideas, because as they say, it's a stream, it keeps on flowing. So so many things get mixed mixed into the stream. It's like a river. So when the river is flowing, you just can't say that it should flow like this or it should flow in a narrow way, in a broad way, it should turn towards this side or that side. So many feelings are mixed in that stream, and the blissful state of the human is that he experiences it, closing his eyes, experiences it by the way the particular fiction is written. So this is the greatest contribution. And what could be the thematic concerns of the stream of consciousness novelists? They speak about the loss. They speak about the fear that is there, and they speak about their aging, and they speak how they suffered in their childhood and how they could recover it in their adulthood or their old age. And they speak about sexuality. They speak about their hidden passions, which they would again, after reading this, get to know in the near future. So these are the thematic concerns, and characters, they do have names. For example, if you go to James Joyce's Ulysses, it's nothing but it stands in parallel to Homer's Odyssey. So when Homer, the hero of the Odyssey, Ulysses, was returning back after the Trojan War to his home, he remembered his wife, and he had a doubt in his mind that maybe Penelope has lost her chastity by now. She must have married some other man, because it's been quite a long time. It's been a decade I've been out of home. So that fear he carried is a classic. I'm talking about the epic written by Homer. So he's carrying all that fear, and then on the way he slays, he kills all those people who had tried to get her Penelope in their lives. So all those people who tried to possess Penelope were all killed, and then there's a happy ending that he goes and meets his wife and realizes that she's really been very much chased. But then when the same epic was read in the 20th century, when life was so much complex and when the morale had literally gone with the winds, could people appreciate that kind of epic, and could people keep it as a model for their lives? Because life had literally changed, and religion was going along with science. So James Joyce did a great thing by writing his Ulysses, and there the hero and the characters that they have, they are not that pure as you find in the epic of Homer. And the heroine there, she has lost her chastity, she has remarried someone because of the situations, because of the coming changes in her life. She had to take those decisions. So the trend that is there in James Joyce or Virginia Woolf, it gives a kind of a justification to the changing ages and the changing morale, changing mindset of the people. And this is what about the characters. And as I said, there is no structure. So you just go on reading, and one might ask, after having read, and of course after that kind of a catharsis, what would ultimately the readers get out of the stream of consciousness? Well, you had a beautiful journey. You went to a wonderland, you just wandered with certain characters, which you must realize as readers of psychological novel that they are not different from you. They are you rather. This is you, this is me. And each person who reads a psychological novel, a stream of conscious novel, must end up saying that these are not very much different from us, and these are a kind of not to be read kind of a characters. No, somewhere at some point they reach us, they touch us, and it is we who are there in those novels. So this was the beautiful your William James psychoanalysis, or Freud or Jung's psychological theories to the field of literature. So I don't want my students to be panicked when they read such kind of literature, because each literary genre or trend that we have in the 20th century gives you a further knowledge, gives you a kind of a further aspiration to know more about life. So friends, even in my upcoming videos, we will be discussing many other trends and many other genres of 20th century. So I hope I'll be talking about science fiction also, along with the horror fiction also. So let's enjoy this journey of literature, and let's be together, let's read, let's write, and let's evolve into good humans. Thank you.